So I'd like to do a little brief bio on Scott. I'm going to read this because if I read some of it anyway. He is the Vice President of Industry Strategy for G-Commerce Incorporated. We met Scott at PWA this year, David and I did, and I was immediately very pleased to have the opportunity to have a conversation with Scott because while he's modest about it, he is an icon in his industry, someone that is well known and respected for all he's done. And my opinion of Scott is he's somebody that gives to the industry, he cares about the industry, and that's something that I admire very much in him.
Thank you.
He was with the Auto Care Association, which was AAIA for many years, for 17 years, and many credit him with being the father of Aces and Pies. And when I said that at PWA, he said, well, I'm not the father, but I was in the room when the baby was born. So, but he is, there is no greater expert in our industry when it comes to Aces and Pies than Scott Luckett. He was VP of Sales at Southern Distributors, and at one time in the world, he was a computer salesman working for a company called Triad, which became Epicor. And some of you heard me say that Triad was the first company I was aware of that ever had automotive gear map auto lookup in their computer system. So he's certainly been involved in this since the early 80s when it comes to understanding product cataloging in the marketplace. Scott frequently speaks. He's a well-known expert and is tapped a lot for his knowledge. So it's really quite an honor for us to have him here today.
Tim and David, thank you again for the invitation, the opportunity to speak to the team and associate members. This is my favorite topic of all. As Tim said, I've kind of been living and breathing this for 20 years. And in the 2 years that I've been away from the trade association, I find myself at G-Commerce still messing with these standards on a daily basis. They are the fuel that powers our business. We are a e-commerce and connectivity service provider, mostly to the automotive aftermarket, all segments of the aftermarket, not just replacement parts, but performance, accessory, tools, equipment, paint, body, heavy duty. We touch all of it. And in every segment of the industry, you've got to communicate accurately and clearly and efficiently lots of content about product. And so these standards that we're going to talk about today evolved over a couple of decades with the input of countless industry volunteers and leaders. I mean, I would say hundreds, but I don't know whether to say it's 200 or 800. A lot of people gave of themselves to result in the work that we're going to talk about over the next few hours. My role at the association was as the staff administrator. So, you know, while lots of labels get hung on me, I can't take credit for actually building any of these standards, but I was the scribe. I was the one hanging up the coats and serving the coffee and make sure the meeting started on time, but also kind of the industry voice and face of the standards, providing education, industry forums where folks could get together and learn about the advantages and the techniques for practicing these standards. So it's in that capacity that I come to you today. There's an educational program that's offered through the University of the Aftermarket, which is a branch of Northwood University in Midland, Michigan. And I was the faculty instructor for aftermarket data standards. The class is probably not taught often enough, which is why Tim asked me if I would dig into the archives, bring a few chapters of content with me here, and teach a portion of the class. But more importantly, as he said, I want to get to the point where we're conversational and I'm responding to your questions, because a couple of you submitted very specific questions. I'm sure I could go on for, as I did for Northwood, a couple of days talking about the standards, just wind me up and let me go. But I want to address your specific concerns, because in the short time I spent in your office this morning, I came to appreciate you guys have a lot of expertise with this. You are far down the road, and you don't need me telling you what a brand code is or anything like that. So I hope we can skip over a lot of that stuff and get into the deeper content. So thanks again for the opportunity. What I want to open with this morning is an overview, and this will be the non-technical part of the presentation. I think whether you're a web developer or a graphic designer or loading in the price sheets, it's all so much more satisfying if you understand the purpose. What's the end game? Why am I staring at 4 monitors and all these little characters and doing this work? What is the benefit to my business? What is the ultimate outcome that we're after? And that's what I want to talk about here, kind of the benefits and advantages of standards, and specifically these automotive standards and best practices. I do want to point out one thing. I'm going to share this slide deck with you, Tim, so you can distribute it to everybody. But all of the materials I'm presenting are still on the AutoCare website from 2 years ago, so they haven't taken them down. That's the link, autocare.org/2014 training. So you'll find all the PowerPoint slides, all the other related assets are there. So you don't need to worry about taking copious notes of what I'm showing you here, because you can go right there and get it, okay? autocare.org/2014 training. Standards is the word that gets thrown around a lot, and just to make sure we're all on the same page with regard to what standards are. You know, in other professions, in accounting, there are generally accepted accounting practices and standards. Even lawyers have standards of one degree or another. And we in the automotive industry thought it was very important to take this complex, hierarchical information that we work with and standardize it to the greatest extent possible without eliminating anyone's competitive advantage. You know, the example I like to use is right now in this room, we're practicing a standard of communication. I think it applies to all of you. We're using English. And immediately, with no negotiation or proprietary mapping, I'm delivering a message, you're receiving the message, it's efficient, it's standards-based. And that just, you know, helps me understand the value of what we're doing here. It's speed to market. It lowers the cost of integration. We don't have to hire a translator to come in here and convert my message to a form that you understand. That's what standards do. They lower, specifically in our industry, they lower the barriers to entry. For a long, long time, back when I was selling Triad computer systems, we were basically the only company that had, as Tim said, a year, make, model, application catalog. Napa had their own, and there really wasn't another choice. Along came Wrenchhead at some point, and there was a little bit of competition, but the Wrenchhead catalog originally came out of, the Triad catalog came out of 2 years of R&D and 200 people in cubes keying in the data from the paper source. That's how the first version of that catalog came to be. There was no electronic data for them to compile. When electronic files, spreadsheets, became available, the folks that ultimately became WHI started compiling those files and just mashing them all together without a whole lot of QA and normalization of the data, and that became their catalog. They couldn't afford the years and the people that Triad had to produce the catalog. Point being, there was a very high barrier to entry. Something that we take for granted today, the ability to Google, you know, water pump, Ford F-150 and get meaningful results back, was unthinkable 18 or 20 years ago. So because there were no standards, because there was no predictable way to structure the data, it was limiting to how many companies could afford the investment to produce a catalog. Standards address that. They increase competition because more companies can get in the business and they can outdo one another and put a different spin on the product. Somebody likes a Google-like interface, somebody else wants drop-downs and so on. So the way you navigate, what the results look like, people compete on those things. You get predictable results with standards. And one of the great examples is in your pocket right now with your credit cards or your gas card, or in my case, my Starbucks card. They are built to industry standards. The magnetic strip is in the same place on every one of those cards. The data is structured in a similar way. The thickness of the card is governed by standards so that it fits in every ATM machine and credit card reader out there. Imagine if there weren't agreed upon standards for simple things like that, and the credit card didn't work in certain devices. So you get predictable results because different companies and businesses in that area, in that arena, got together and agreed on a single best way of doing it. You get faster innovation. When lots of decisions about how thick does it need to be and where we're going to put the magnetic strip, those decisions have been made. Let's move on to how secure we can encrypt the data in that card, for example. So you get faster innovation. All of these things combine to lower the cost of doing anything. So standards, I think we'll agree, are pretty good. Specifically, standards matter more now than ever before in the automotive industry because the technology we use has changed. You guys are on the point of the spear for that. The customer that we all serve has changed. And I'll talk a little bit about the demographics and how that impacts us. And the business overall is changing at a pace that is just something we've never seen before. So let's talk about how the technology has changed. This is what a parts store looked like when I was in the early stages of my career. Got the big old paper catalog rack. Greg, you got the bottles of Jack Daniels up on the shelf there behind the guy. They didn't have that last night, did they?
Didn't have any wrenches or bells.
No, they did not. But that was the state of the art, right? In the 70s, 80s, and all the years that led up to that. Paper-sourced catalogs. The paper book, of course, we like to say, was out of date before the ink even dried in it. It was going to be a year, maybe 2 years before a new book came along with new part introductions. I heard today how important, how vital it is, especially in your industry, where the information about new products reaches the point of decision as fast as possible. These are fashion accessories for your vehicle. And I don't want to learn about it a year from now. I want to learn about it as soon as it becomes available. Along came electronic cataloging, and those big paper catalog racks, they got pushed to a back counter and replaced by that computer terminal. But even then, it was taking months for the content, the catalog updates from the manufacturers, to get through that meat grinder of a process, distributed either on a CD or a tape, and installed at the point of sale. So even electronic cataloging, as sophisticated as it was slow. And the leading complaint about Triad, the company that innovated cataloging, was that it took too darn long to get the updates. So now we live in a web-based world. And all of the information about all of the products is available to all of the customers with a couple of mouse clicks. And the expectation for what's available out there is as high as it's ever been. It's got to be graphical, it's got to be informative, and it's got to be near real time. And that's something you all are heavily invested in. That's something my business is invested in. The customers themselves have changed. Now, in looking at the room, I think I'm talking about most of you, the millennials, the folks who, believe it or not, Tim, have never known a day without the internet. They grew up pushing buttons, clicking mouses, from the time they were a year or two old. Probably put a Game Boy in their hand a little too early, but my kids seem to have survived it. They're plugged in, multitasking, wired, sitting in front of the television with their tablet and their texting and the cell phone going and the Facebook updates. They want all the content, they have that expectation. That's the world they live in. And it's just going to get more frantic, and the expectations continue to go higher. In business, the efficiency of doing your business online is an important driver. We talked about it this morning with David. You know, many customers, and whether it's a commercial shop or a retail consumer, they've done their homework before they engage with you or your member, haven't they? They've been online, they've done their product research. They know as much about that product as the guy behind the counter. And they often walk into the store or call the store and say, I need part number 1, 2, 3, 4. Or, increasingly, they just want to hit a few keys and order it online. They don't even need to come to the store except to pick it up or perhaps have it delivered to them. So we've got a self-service, on-demand economy. And the Auto Care Association did a research study last year that was really a first-of-its-kind benchmark. They established the rate of change in our industry. They found that the rate of growth in online e-tailing is 13% year over year. It's the fastest growing channel of distribution in the aftermarket. And this is commerce done on openpublic.com websites. This is not the proprietary A-Connect network or anything like that. This is businesses and consumers going online, shopping and buying product through a .com website. And think about it. It's not just, you know, the driveway mechanic planning next weekend's project. It's municipalities, it's fleet operators, it's all kinds of commercial businesses. The Auto Care Association's got a panel of top shop operators. It's called the Car Care Professionals Network. It's kind of an advisory board of what's going on in the shops. And these top operators say, well, all of my techs have got a ruggedized laptop in the bay. They're under the vehicle, snapping pictures of the condition, going to Mitchell or ALLDATA, reading the tech service bulletins at the car, looking for parts, looking for repair procedures at the car. So that's the customer we're serving. You know, that's whether it's professional or consumer. So I like to say the digital aftermarket is here, has been here for a decade. It's a freight train coming right at us. Another aspect of this change is the changing demographic of the industry professionals. You know, a lot of us know this guy. He's been in the business for 30 or 40 years. He can recite part numbers off the top of his head. He's got all the top movers committed to memory. And he's retiring, according to AARP, at the rate of 100,000 a day. So the brain drain is underway. And all that experience is walking out the door and heading to the beach or the mountains. The career counterman is vanishing. This affects some segments of the industry more than others. I was speaking at an event of heavy-duty parts distributors. And these guys are even further behind than the performance, accessory, traditional aftermarket. A lot of their shops don't have a catalog system at all. They continue to depend on the paper sources because of the nature of heavy-duty truck parts. You can't really do a year, make, model, engine lookup on a Mack tractor trailer going down the road. They're built to spec. And these guys are kind of terrified about the future because their parts professionals are retiring at a great rate, and they need to innovate and build the technology that's going to replace them. You know, what do the people look like? Who's replacing this guy? Well, they look like you. They're young, they're inexperienced parts people, but they know how to operate a computer, they understand technology, they're not intimidated by it. And the challenge is to provide them with the appearance of experience and credibility through the technology that's in front of them or in their hand. These people need to give the customer a sense of confidence and assurance in the products that are being pushed across the counter to them. And companies like Advance and AutoZone and O'Reilly, the big retailers that I've worked with, are spending a ton of money to put the information and the expertise on the screen in front of the customer. Because whether it's in the store or whether I'm a customer shopping at home or my business, everything, you know, we're in a phase where You used to depend on a conversation. David and I were having this talk this morning. You used to depend on a conversation with the counter pro. The opportunity for that counter pro to sell you something. Say, well, I've got good, better, and best, and I think the better would be the appropriate choice for you because that car is not very old and you want to get the longer life out of the product. But if it's a 30-year-old beater, maybe you can get away with my economy grade product. Knowledge exchange. Today it's being done online. And the customer's decision about what product they will buy is based entirely on what they can glean from the screen. And so as I was seeing this morning, your investment in all that content, the systems that tell the product story to the customer, again, whether it's professional or consumer, they still need that product information imparted to them in a way that helps them make an informed decision. Because as you're going to see here in a moment, if you don't give them the information and all they see is availability and price, it's going to drive down their economic decision. All other things being equal, if I can't understand why this product is better than that product, I think the one that costs less is cheaper. You know, I'm going to pick that one. So the business has changed. We have the rise of e-tailers. My gosh, I was talking with John Wiley at SDC recently, and he's up to 1,000 data receivers. Folks pulling those hundreds of brands of content out of his data pool, and I'll bet about 950 of them are virtual retailers. You know, they're online resellers, not brick and mortar stores. So the e-tailers have entered the industry. They can give the appearance of having everything, infinite aisles, right? You go to Amazon and everything's available there. Amazon's who set the bar. That's where the customer's expectations are. They've had that experience, and all the e-tailers are trying to emulate that. Now they may stick to brake or undercar or something like that, appearance products, to narrow it down a little bit. But you've got to give the appearance of infinite information about an infinite assortment of products. You've had consolidation in the wholesale groups and chains. That continues. The retail chains continue to buy up one another. I think there's probably still another big move to be made in that part of the industry. Inventory growth and supply chain costs are growing. At the PWA, I was struck dumb by one of the sales managers at one of the larger vendors who was so proud of the fact that they had announced 900 new part numbers this year. And he was bemoaning the fact that his distributors don't choose to stock as much as he'd like. Well, you introduced 900 new part numbers. How many did you take off the table? Oh, none. You know, these are fashion accessories, and so we keep them around forever. So the inventory assortment continues to grow and grow and grow. Joy, I wanted to ask you, compiling all those price sheets, in total, roughly, how many SKUs are in the database? How many items are there?
Oh, wow.
Hundreds of thousands?
I mean, I'd say over 100,000. Isn't that about right, Paul?
No, it's about,
Right now, it's close to 150. I think we'll probably, by the end of the year, be at 250,000.
Yeah, yeah.
We're going with some of the non-program ones to add.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yeah, that was
So
program.
that number has one direction. It is up and up and up at a significant rate. Yeah, yeah. Thank you. That's good information. You guys know, and you've played in this arena, the line between virtual and physical inventory is kind of blurring. When I look at the screen, you know, it may indicate quantity available or in stock, or there may be a little pause and the hourglass is spinning and then it says available from master stock. Well, that means my local distribution network doesn't have it in stock, but I've checked beyond my local distribution network and it's available from the manufacturer perhaps. All the same to you, 2-day shipping, it'll be on your doorstep. So whether it's coming from the store or the warehouse, or whether it's coming from some other third-party fulfillment, to the customer, it's all the same. And a lot of technology goes into satisfying those requests. Some of you are familiar with our friend John Washbish. He's the president of the Alliance Group. Some of your members also belong to the Alliance Group. John, Where do we start?
Piece of work.
Piece of work indeed. Grew up in the industry, family business, Moog, Louisville warehouse. John was one of the first high-level executives in the industry who really got it. 15 years ago, when these standards were just starting to come together, he and the people he surrounded himself with were some of the most ardent supporters of what we were doing. John understands that great data will help his members sell more product, sell the right product the first time, and keep it sold. You understand what I'm saying there? Good data means the customer made a good decision. They're not going to return it. They're not going to have any buyer's remorse down the road. So John gives us these examples. The number of SKUs has doubled in the last 10 years. Even auto value bumper to bumper people can't keep up. The point of sale system's only as good as the data. So we need error-free application data, robust product attribute data, and data that is synchronized. And your scorecard, in part, addresses that. You know, if you've got 900 part numbers in the price sheet, but you've only got product information for 800 part numbers, what am I to conclude about those last 100? Are they available? Are they obsolete? And what if the manufacturer, in our case, they send us the product information and they send us the inventory availability? Because one of the services we provide at G-Commerce is we act as a proxy for the manufacturer. If you have an inquiry about that item that is not in your local distribution network, we can check and say, well, you know, as of 8 o'clock this morning, they had it. And so we'll take an order and we'll send it to the manufacturer and have it drop shipped, fulfilled for you. But what if we got 900 products on the inventory feed and only product information for 800? We can't take an order for those last 100 items. And the same is true if it was the reverse. If we had more product information than we had inventory information. We assume a responsibility to only take orders for product that we know can be filled. So the synchronization of these data sets is really of great importance. John also says in the current economy, this goes back a couple of years, but I think it's still true today. I've learned that especially the performance segment's somewhat flat in certain regions of the country due to economic factors. And when the economy is tough and there is not a compelling value story told by the content, then price is boss. And the customer, if you haven't given them a good reason to choose the better product, they're going to choose the most affordable product for their needs. That's a disservice to many customers and erodes the profitability of all of us in the supply chain. In the absence of a compelling value proposition, price is the boss. That's why the content is so essential. And I think I've made this point pretty clear. If you have a choice between two sets of spark plug wires and the customer says, well, what's the difference besides one's red and one's blue? And the best answer the counterman's got is 20 bucks. That's not a very good answer. John Denny at the time was Vice President of Merchandise at Advance Auto Parts. And it's a difficult to read example, I'm sure, but on their advanceautoparts.com website, they like to feature product attribute information. And I'm saying attribute very specifically because if you are familiar with the PIES standard, you know there's an attribute segment. This is not how big is it, what does it weigh type attributes. These are performance and physical attributes of the product. And Advance Auto Parts, they thought it was important to call out to the customer what's included in the box. You know, if this is a timing set, are the gaskets included? Is the hardware included? Is it adjustable and so on? What type of chain does it have? So these are performance and physical attributes of the product that help the customer make an informed decision. So if you're a supplier to Advance Auto Parts, that's a requirement that you supply that kind of information to them. Confirmation of what's not included in the box serves as a reminder to the customer or a team member that there may be some related items that need to be sold at the time the customer is picking up the gasket set. You're going to take the timing cover off. You need the gaskets to put it back on, for example. Data synchronization. The fellow who really is the father of pies is named Ed Heon. Ed grew up practicing data standards in the electrical industry, and then one day found himself with some automotive folks, and the rest is kind of history. Ed works for a company called Data Agility now. At this point, 8-9 years ago, Ed had a guess that distributors and suppliers were not fully aligned on the product information. They each had their own version of the truth. And to test that theory, what we did with the help of the association and Ed's leadership is we recruited 4 resellers. So we had a couple of big retailers, we had a couple of big WD operations. This is all on the traditional side, but I'm going to guess the conclusions would carry over to any other segment of the industry. And we found 4 manufacturer suppliers to these WDs. We picked 8 product lines that were traded regularly. So we took the filter line and the belt and hose line and the gasket line and a couple of others. And we identified just 8 fields of information that are essential for commerce. So if these WDs are regularly submitting orders to the suppliers for these products, the part number, the GTIN, the minimum order quantity, the description perhaps, these are examples of elements of information that are essential for this transaction to work. The standard package, for example. And we had the suppliers send their information, their inventory file, if you will, and compared it to the WD's information for those same 8 fields and the same brands. What we found, of course, was that there was some overlap, but there was also a lot of outliers. We had data disconnects. We had suppliers offering products that their distributors did not have set up in their inventory files. That you can sort of understand. We had distributors with product that the suppliers no longer recognized. That's a bad thing, but it's commonplace in our industry. What you aspire to, of course, is full data synchronization between you and your trading partners. The kinds of conditions that were found were, I don't have a laser, but the part number, unidentifiable. 11% of the items that were in the scope of this, and it was tens of thousands of items, maybe over 100,000 by the end of the day. 11% of the part numbers found in the WD systems were unrecognizable by the supplier. There were quantity differences. Either the minimum order quantity or the standard package did not agree between the maker of the product and the first line distributor of the product. Wix put 6 in a box, and somehow that WD thought they were 12 to a box. And so he's ordering 12 when he could have ordered 6. Now we've got an inventory imbalance situation. Or he doesn't know the minimum order quantity is 6, and he orders 1. Now he's getting shipped 6 when he only wanted 1. Price differences. When we asked, what is your version of jobber and what is your version of jobber for the same item? Disagreements. And there were many items that had multiple differences. These conditions are obstacles to doing electronic commerce. And so what I'm doing with this topic is I'm trying to raise your awareness that your members, in trying to transact orders electronically with their suppliers, should focus on making sure the content, the data, is in sync. Because otherwise, you get invoices that don't match, you get shipments that are different from what you expected for the purchase order, and all of these conditions cost money to rectify. You know, if you don't allow for the fact that the hose comes in a 250-foot spool, and you order 250 thinking you're going to get 1 spool, if you and the supplier are not talking in the same unit of measure, that's going to be a big delivery when it shows up. And it happens every day. It happens every single day. So I'm just raising your awareness to the importance, the value, the economic impact of unsynchronized data between suppliers and buyers. We put a price tag on it and figured that just fixing errors in invoices and purchase orders costs our industry about $1.7 billion a year in fixing those errors. And that was 10 years ago. So it's an area that deserves some attention. And I got a couple of survey questions here that I don't think we'll worry about. Rich content. And I think I heard the phrase used here at AAM. And you are invested in rich content, publishing rich content on your website, making it available to your members. The bar keeps getting higher and higher. We were looking at a K&N item. And of course, I'm not surprised to see K&N sends 12 images of the product. That's absolutely great. In the box, out of the box, front of the box, back of the box. You got multiple product images. Digital assets are everything from the OSHA compliance documents, the safety data sheets, to installation instructions, product brochures. You could have videos, installation videos, product feature videos. You could have market copy, which explains features and benefits in a bulleted form. I think that's the answer to one of the questions that was submitted to me. Performance attributes, I gave examples of that, and there's now a dedicated segment in the standard for communicating what is it made of, how long is its life, what voltage, what is the length of the lead, all these things that are facts about the product, not subjective marketing copy, but performance and physical facts. That's what, when we say product attributes in the area of the standards, we're talking about facts there. Interchange, some attention's been given to that segment of the standard because the folks at Tenneco, as it turns out, said, you know, that one-piece original equipment exhaust system comes off the vehicle and we replace it with a 14-piece assembly with hangers and brackets and adapter pipes and so forth. So we need a one-to-many capability in the interchange segment. So a recent version of PIES was published that incorporated that. Packaging refers to kits and so forth, as well as the basic packaging of the product, how many come in a box, what does it weigh. That again is an essential piece of information for my business because when we act as a proxy for that manufacturer and we take that order, we also estimate the freight cost. We've got an integration with UPS and FedEx so that right on the screen in the inquiry response we say UPS second day is $14. That's based on knowing accurately the weights and dimensions of the product as found in the PIES files that we get from the same sources you get them from. So just a couple examples of rich content. It includes interchange information, it includes packaging information, it includes product attribute information. We've got a couple images of the product there. This allows the counterperson to talk about the product with confidence. It allows a customer, whether consumer or commercial, to select this product with confidence. It's not just limited to traditional product. Certain categories get into very sophisticated images of the product. You certainly have experience with this. You know, everything from dynamometer output. And my favorite example, if it will work, even sounds. And it won't, so that's all right. You all know what it sounds like. But MagnaFlow and others have got audio clips because the customer is going to select the product based on how cool it makes his sound, his truck sound. That's probably how Dave chose his exhaust system. So I conclude this segment by talking about the value of these standards to the business people, because you would not believe for a long, long time we were pushing this rock up the hill, and how often I heard the catalog guys, the data content guys, even the marketing guys say, Scott, can you get management to understand that we need the resources to do this? Can you talk to the C-level, the C-suite, and tell them what the advantage of investing in this capability is? Because it's a conversion from a paper-based process of publishing information to all this electronic data. And we really boiled it down to three things that I think resonated with management. You will increase your sales. You will empower the staff at the retail store, if it's AutoZone or Advance or even a point-of-sale store, and you'll satisfy the customer. Sales go up with better content. Ryan Murphy was running WHI, and then he went on to run eBay Motors, and he said it was absolutely amazing the lift you'd see in sales when a supplier replaced all those little boxes with the X where an image is supposed to be with a library of images. You know, if you don't have an image, don't bother. It's not going to sell. As soon as the images were put up, the sales in a category would double and then double again. So good product data delivered to the channel partners in a standard form will increase sales. You'll improve margins. Remember the words of John Washbish, without good product data, price is boss. You can upsell. You can sell the appropriate product. My gosh, so much of what you deal in, it's all optional, right? Nobody needs what your members are trading in. So you've really got to tell that story. You got to put the sizzle on the steak, and good, rich, standardized content does that and lifts margins. And of course, if you sell the right product the first time, returns will go down. That product stays sold, and that's what we all want. So there's your keyword map, but it's all the topics that we talked about, and that is the value of aftermarket data standards to your business and all of us in the aftermarket. Any questions come out of that? You want to challenge any of the points I made? Okay, thank you very much.
Studies that identify the lift that data, that quantifies the lift that data can make in a product line. We've got some small vendors that we need to challenge to step their data game up.
There honestly hasn't been, Tim, and that's a great opportunity. It is difficult to measure that because there's so many factors that go into it. But I think at this point, you know, you have to look at adoption. To the small guy, you just have to look at the fact that there are now 1,000 or more automotive businesses practicing these standards. They are the non-negotiable requirements of every major retailer and wholesale group in the industry. You don't get your product in the door at AutoZone or CarQuest or O'Reilly unless you can supply this content in this form. Now, saying that, I want to be sure you understand, resellers can put their own little spin on the standards. And we could talk all afternoon about whether, well, are they still practicing the standard if they say, instead of the PCDB code, I want you to put my part classification code in that field. But everything else is standardized. So that's okay. That's okay. We're never going to get anyone to say 100% of the standard is okay with me. But it's hard to deny that this is the way our industry communicates, and you're not in the game unless you're practicing these standards. You guys with your scorecard and with the tools and visibility you're building for your suppliers are doing everything you can to encourage it. But a data study, a research project hasn't been launched that I'm aware of.